is going on, college basketball fans? And welcome back to episode number 5 of the Danny Hoops podcast. As always, we do this podcast every Thursday night at 10. Of course, today is Friday night, and that is because last night I was at a Marshall basketball game, Appalachian State at Marshall. Really good, fun game to open up Sun Belt play down in Huntington. A lot of fun, and we will be back on schedule for the Danny Hoops podcast next week on Thursday, every Thursday night at 10 p.m. We are live. Make sure you guys join live if you guys are able to. If not, you guys can always listen after, as it will be up on YouTube after we are live under the live section on the channel. But if you guys are here, you guys can ask me questions at the end of the podcast. And as always, at the end of the podcast, before the questions, I will give you guys my top player of the year candidates and also my top national championship contenders. But today's list of things we have to talk about today. Conference play. Conference play is here. That's really the main topic we're going to be surrounding our discussions around today. We had SEC play really get kicked off yesterday. We had some big upsets in there. I'm going to be giving you guys my top 3 contenders to win each of the Power 6 conferences. So we'll go through. I'll tell you guys all 3 of my top contenders to win those conferences in the regular season. And then I will give you guys a little bit of a preview. We'll talk some preview for some of the bigger games on New Year's Eve tomorrow. Big 12 play opens up tomorrow on New Year's Eve, so a lot of really good games going on tomorrow in the Big 12. A really big matchup in the Big East that we will talk about. And yeah, so I am ready to get it started. So conference play in full swing. Yesterday in the SEC, we really got kicked off with some really fun games. We had a few big upsets that include Missouri really starting to exceed expectations by a lot with all of their transfers they've had come in, with first-year head coach Dennis Gates really surprising the country and pulling off a big-time upset at home over Kentucky. And they didn't only beat them at home, but they beat them bad by over 20 points, destroyed them the entire game. And what another great win by the Tigers. It's their second top ranked win in a row. They beat Illinois before the little Christmas break, and then they came back with a big win over Kentucky. So Missouri looking to be a lot better than we thought they were, and those 2 wins are going to carry all the way to March, and it's looking like Missouri is a contender to win the SEC. So don't sleep on them. They are a sleeper pick still, I would consider, but definitely making some noise here early in conference play. We also had another upset down in Baton Rouge, and that was LSU defeating Arkansas at home in a very good game. KJ Williams wasn't even really that much of a factor in that game. It was really some bench scoring there for LSU that was propelling them, and some good defense throughout. And down the stretch, it was a really fun game, a really physical game. The first game of SEC play, let me say, the SEC is a very physical league, and the refs are not just going to call these little pity fouls. They are going to let these teams play, and I really enjoyed watching the SEC play. But we also had another near upset as Auburn survives at home narrowly against Florida last night, and Florida was expected, at least in my eyes, to be a tournament team, to be a sleeper in the SEC, but they just haven't really been all that great this year. And for them to almost upset Auburn, I thought they played a really good game there in Auburn, and Auburn just yet to really get that good statement win. I just can't buy into this Auburn team yet. I don't know what it is, but I have at least 4 or 5 teams ahead of Auburn in the SEC at this point. But we also had Alabama traveling to Mississippi State, and that was a really good game throughout the first half. There, along the first 10 to 12 minutes, Mississippi State was really locking up Alabama defensively, but then Alabama just got a spark plug, and Brandon Miller and really the whole team just started turning up, scoring, hitting their threes, went on a run before the half, and really pulled away in the second half. So Alabama, very impressive win against, at the time, a one-loss Mississippi State team on the road. A really good win for Alabama there. So with conference play getting up into full swing with the Big 12 starting conference play tomorrow, I want to kind of let you guys know my top 3 contenders to win the regular season conference title in each of the Power 6 conferences. So since we got Big 12 on our mind, let's go ahead and start with them. Conference play starting tomorrow. As you guys know, I am a West Virginia fan, so I'm really hyped for the game tomorrow. I'm hyped to get into conference play. Big 12 play is always a gauntlet. It's always a ton of fun. So let's start there. So, of course, my number one contender to win the Big 12 is the Kansas Jayhawks, and it's hard not to pick them at this point in the season with the way that they have been playing recently, putting up a ton of points, defeating some good teams by a lot of points. I mean, look at what they did to Missouri, and now look at what Missouri's doing to these other teams. I mean, Kansas is looking legit, and they don't even really have a true center that's playing too well for them. I mean, they rely on their forwards and guards to pick up a lot of the slack on the rebounds, especially Jalen Wilson, Kevin McCullough. Those are their leading rebounders right now, and but they play good defense. They're lengthy, they're athletic. They have a really solid team there. So Kansas, definitely my favorites to win the Big 12 at this point in the season. Like I said, hard not to like what you're seeing from the Jayhawks at this point. Number 2 is tricky. Number 2 and number 3 is tricky because the Big 12 is a very deep conference. Like, I would be surprised 7 or 8 teams are going to make the NCAA tournament out of the 10 Big 12 teams. And all 10 teams are really good. I mean, they're all going to be close to the bubble, in my opinion, other than possibly Oklahoma State. So I would. It's a deep conference. At number 2, I'm going to go with the Baylor Bears, though. I think that this team, the starting 5, is really going to, I think the Big 12 is going to hurt each other in ways, but they're still going to have your top teams. Like, road games in the Big 12 are hard, but number 2, I'm going to go with Baylor. I think Baylor will travel well against most teams. I think they have really good veteran guard play between Adam Flagler and LJ Cryer. And then, of course, they have their freshman guard, Keontae George, who is also very good, one of the best freshmen in the country. I feel like a lot of people are sleeping on Baylor, but it would not surprise me if they wind up winning the Big 12 conference. They have a really solid team. I think Flo Thamba, I expected a little bit more out of him preseason because last season it was starting to look like Flo Thamba was really breaking out. But I think you can credit that to kind of the play designs by Scott Drew, and also the passing by these Baylor guards, which are really setting him up to have some easy dunks, some easy baskets really close to the rim. But Flo Thamba, still a ton of potential down there at center. I'm interested to see how he'll play against some of these top centers in the Big 12. So I have Baylor as my number 2 contender in the conference. And my number 3 contender in the conference, I still have to go with Texas. I know the whole Chris Beard situation kind of like everybody's kind of turned off on Texas right now, but Coach Rodney Taylor, or Rodney Terry, excuse me, is undefeated so far, and they really haven't played anyone since the whole Chris Beard situation went down. So I'm excited to see how they play here in Big 12 play. The reason I have them number 3 behind Kansas and Baylor is because I don't know how well Texas is going to do on the road against these other Big 12 teams, like teams like West Virginia, teams like Texas Tech, Kansas especially. I mean, everyone's going to have trouble at Kansas, at Baylor. All these tough environments, I don't know if Texas is going to be able to travel well, because you think about all their big wins they've had this season against Gonzaga, against Creighton. They've all been at home, and the one big game that they had that was away from Austin was a neutral site game against Illinois in Madison Square Garden, and they were unable to finish that one. So I worry about how good this Texas team is going to travel in league play. So I have them down here at number 3. Next up, let's get into some Big East talk, because the Big East, there's a really Big East game tomorrow. We will talk about that one whenever we are previewing our New Year's Eve games here next. But the Big East, of course, number 1, we'll go ahead and get it out of the way. It's the UConn Huskies. They're undefeated. They're the deepest team in the country. Hard to find too much wrong with this team at this point. Some guys will have off nights. Other guys will pick up their slack. That's the safety in having such a deep team, right? So UConn looks really good. Hard to see them picking up more than, I'd say, 3 losses across the conference. Like, I'm pretty confident that UConn is going to win the Big East regular season, but we will see. They do have a tough road matchup tomorrow. Number 2, my number 2 team here in the Big East, as far as who I would pick. These are kind of like odds to win the regular season conference for each of the Power 6. So at number 2 here for the Big East, just behind the Huskies, I do have the Xavier Musketeers. And Xavier, they have a really good environment. First year back for Coach Sean Miller there at his second stint in Xavier, and he has been a huge upgrade from what they had last year. And with this roster, I think Xavier has one of the most underrated starting 5s in the country. I think they have a really good guard play between Colby Jones, Soli Boom. They have a good center who can shoot the 3 ball, and Jack Nunge. They got a good road win the other day against St. John's, where they really put up a bunch of points. The only thing about this Xavier team that I really worry about Xavier's defense. I don't think that Xavier has a very good defense, but we'll see if they can work out some kinks in there. But they're definitely going to have to work that out, because if they don't, then I don't know how far I see this team going in March. Like, I could see them having a short run in March Madness if they find the right matchup of a team that can put up some points, along with them not having a great defense. It could be rough going for them as we get into the tournament. So the number 3 spot in the Big East is super, super interesting, because there are a lot of teams that could, I don't want to say a lot of teams, I'll say like 3 teams you could really say could possibly take this 3 spot here in the Big East. And I decided to go with Providence. I decided to go with the Friars as my 3rd most likely to win the Big East. They did already get a good win at home over Marquette, which was really the other main option for that I was considering for this 3 spot. So they already have that head-to-head win. They went and got another Big East win after that. I mean, Providence is looking really good, and Bryce Hawkins, the transfer from Kentucky, is looking really good as well. So I have the Friars coming in here at number 3. Coach Ed Cooley, I don't know why me or anyone ever doubted that Providence would be as good this year, because they hit the transfer portal hard. They're another team similar to Missouri who hit the transfer portal super hard this season. And then Ed Cooley, we all know his pick and pop play style, his good defense, it gets the job done. And I have Providence as number 3 in the Big East at this point in time. Next up, let's talk about the SEC. We talked about some of the games from the other day. Now let's talk about my top 3, because it does get interesting, because the SEC is a lot deeper of a conference that I originally had thought, right? you think about, they have Missouri, they have LSU, they have Mississippi State, Kentucky, all kind of in the mix there. Well, Kentucky we kind of expected to be a lot better, but those other three we didn't really expect them to be this good. Instead of like teams like Missouri, Mississippi State, we thought maybe teams like Florida or Texas A&M would be, kind of in that mix. But pleasantly, I am surprised by these teams, and I'm happy that they are doing good because it's going to make for some more interesting conference games down the stretch of the season. So at number one in the SEC, I do have Alabama. Still, I thought their win on the road against Mississippi State was super impressive. Of course, they have really good wins across the year already against teams like Houston on the road. That one's going to carry all the way to March, help them get a pretty good seed, especially if they can win the SEC conference regular season, which currently I have them as the favorite to do so. That could go a long way as far as seeding, and this could be the year that Alabama actually makes a deep run into the tournament. I feel like Alabama, they never really get past the Sweet 16. If they even get there, they're kind of always a first or second round exit. The past few years, then they always get kind of like that 4 or 5 seed. Maybe this is the year they get like a 3 or even a 2 seed if they can win their conference and really start to make a run in the tournament. They have the best freshman in the country, and Brandon Miller, another good freshman down low at the center position, and Noah Clowney. And they have some good guard play between Mark Sears and Quinterly. Quinterly's been struggling. I'm not a huge fan of Quinterly, but he's shown in past years that he can be a really good piece to this team. And I think that if he can get it together throughout conference play, look out for Bama to make a run in the March Madness tournament. At number 2, I do have Tennessee. It's not really a close 2 for me. I think Tennessee, you could have arguments for them to be number 1 and be the favorites heading into conference play because they've looked pretty good. I thought their loss on the road to Arizona was actually not that bad of a loss. They played pretty good throughout that game, and they had their opportunities to win it, and they didn't really look as stagnant on offense as they did in games prior. So I've been impressed with Tennessee. I think that they definitely are. It's kind of like 1A, 1B for me with Alabama and Tennessee. So a big gap between 1 and 2, and then number 3. So at number 3, I do. I'll talk about Tennessee a little bit more because I do want to say Rick Barnes, coach of the Volunteers, he does do pretty good normally in the regular season, but then when they get to March Madness, it's a whole mess. But if we're talking conference play here, I do think Tennessee is up here at number 2. But at number 3, I do have still, even after getting upset a couple days ago, I do have Arkansas, and I know they have the injuries with Nick Smith Jr., with Tony Brazil, who is a really good defensive piece for them as well. But Jordan Walsh, another freshman for this Arkansas team, I think did show some promise in that LSU game. And I think he is going to be the third piece, like main piece to this team, just behind Anthony Black and Ricky Council the fourth. He can be that third guy who can really help Arkansas make a run this year and do good in the regular season. And I believe in Eric Musselman, so it's hard for me to push them out of the top 3 after one close road loss when they're still dealing with those injuries and working on their team. So I think throughout the season, Arkansas, I'm sticking with them. I still have them as my number 3. A lot of good teams here in the SEC, though, between Missouri, who definitely deserves some consideration, at least, for that number 3 spot after that blowout win against Kentucky and how good they've been looking, but also LSU, who just beat Arkansas, but I do think Arkansas will respond and beat them later on. If do they play in Fayetteville? If LSU plays in Fayetteville, I'd say Arkansas gets the win back on that one. And then, of course, you have Kentucky, which who knows, they may decide to, switch gears here and turn up here and become the team we all thought that they could be at the beginning of the season. Next up, let's get into the Big Ten Conference, because the Big Ten Conference has been really good this season. They have a potential for a lot of bids into the NCAA tournament, and it was tough for me to pick this top three, because for that 2 and 3 spot, there are a bunch of teams that you could really consider for the top three contenders in the Big Ten. At number one, of course, you guys know who I went with. I went with the Purdue Boilermakers, undefeated. They have the Yao Ming of college basketball in Zach Edey, putting up 23 and 14, ridiculous numbers. Just an insane player, and they have good shooters around him. They probably should try to improve the shooting around him, but um, still undefeated. Excited to see them get into Big Ten play. Definitely my favorites to win the Big Ten Conference at this point. Number two, I actually do have the Wisconsin Badgers, and I think Greg Gard, one of the most underrated head coaches in the country. What he's done after losing Johnny Davis and these boys, rebuilding this team, found a new guy in Tyler Wall. They're a really good defensive team. They like to play a little bit lower scoring, and I do think that Wisconsin does have potential, and they've shown that they can beat some good teams, like beating Marquette on the road in an in-state rivalry game. Beating Iowa up, which doesn't look as good now, but it is a conference win, and I was a whole nother story, but they're looking really rough right now. But yeah, I do like this Wisconsin team, and I do have them coming in here at number two for my Big Ten contenders. At number three, I do have the Indiana Hoosiers, and I know that they have had a rough go about here recently at the end of non-conference play, between getting beat in a neutral site to Arizona, a very good Arizona team with really good big men, really good shooters, and a high-powered offense there under Tommy Lloyd, and then having to go to what I consider the toughest environment in college basketball in Allen Fieldhouse and face the Kansas Jayhawks. Got beat up in there. So I think that kind of turned people off a little bit on Indiana, but they still have a really solid team. And they have still, when they do have a good team like they do have this year, Assembly Hall is another one of the best environments in college basketball. I don't see them losing many home games in the Big Ten, along with TJD, who's going to have some big games. Xavier Johnson, a really good two-way point guard. You got to get him back and healthy. And with his injury, they're going to have the freshman step in. He's going to get some really good experience there. So I do have Indiana coming in at number three. I think that they still have a lot of potential to make some noise here in the Big Ten, and they are my third favorite here to win the conference. You do have some other teams like Illinois. Illinois has been struggling recently, a few bad losses, especially that bad loss to Missouri right before the Christmas break there. I don't know what's going on with Illinois, but they do have a lot of potential. Like they've shown in that Texas game, if they get Matt Meyer going, along with Terrence Shannon Jr. going, I mean, that team is very scary if they can get the whole squad hooping. So Illinois, an honorable mention, but I had to leave them out with their recent schedule or their recent struggles there. Maryland, another team that got a hot start, that got hot early, but have been struggling as of late, left them off of the list. There are some other really good teams there in the Big Ten as well, but those are my top three. Next up, let's get into the Pac-12 conference. The Pac-12, not that great of a conference. I don't think they're getting more than 4 or 5 bids into the tournament this year. So at number one, number one is actually, it's kind of like another situation where it's 1A, 1B for me. But at number one, I do have Arizona. I think Arizona, with their two bigs, and Turbellis and Ballo, those guys are insane mismatch problem there, and they have good guard play around them and good shooting around them, which is very important. They're really uh, high-powered offense, and I do have Arizona coming in here at number one. I just think they've shown a lot of potential. They have two really good non-conference wins this season against Tennessee and against Indiana. They're looking really good. At number two, I do have UCLA. They're my 1B to Arizona being my 1A, but I had to put them in here at number two. They've looked really good lately, and I was very close to putting UCLA number one. I cannot wait to watch Arizona versus UCLA this season. It's going to be a super good game. I cannot wait for it. UCLA, Jaden Clark really stepped up this season. He has been a really good two-way player and a good surprise for this team. They do have Tiger Campbell there, the veteran point guard. That is huge for this team. Jamie Yaquez as well, and I've said this a few times here on the channel now. I think that this UCLA team is better than last year's team that they had with Johnny Juzang. I think this is the best UCLA team that we've had in the past few years. So I'm pretty hyped up about them. I could definitely see them winning the conference. I was very, very close to putting them above Zona. So number three was the toss-up for me. Those are the clear number two for me, or the clear top two for me. But number three was a toss-up between three teams, really. And I decided to go with Utah. And the reason I decided to go with Utah mainly is because they already have a conference win over Arizona. And that could go long ways when determining a regular season champion. And that's kind of what I'm doing here. The odds for winning the conference. So I decided to go with Utah at number three because they already have a conference win over over the top team in the conference in Arizona. So that is a huge, massive win for the Utes, and that could help them lock up a spot in March Madness if they can continue to have a surprisingly good season. The other two that were in contention here for this number three spot was Arizona State, a really good team. They had a tough loss there to San Francisco recently, so that kind of bumped them out right there. If they would have beaten San Francisco, I think I probably still would have gave them the edge over Utah there, but I decided to go with Utah. And then the other one, USC. I don't know if USC is going to make the tournament. I think they're kind of borderline. I would say probably not. So that they would be my number five here at this point. But I thought I'd give them a quick mention. And the last conference here for the Power Six conferences that we will be discussing, my top three favorites to win the regular season conference championship is the ACC conference. And we had some good ACC games here today. Pitt upset North Carolina. That was a crazy game. A huge game there for Pitt and big for West Virginia because, of course, WVU did beat Pitt on the road by 26 points. So how about the Mountaineers? That win is going to look a lot better now. But top three in the ACC, I do have the Miami Hurricanes. They played earlier today as well and got a good win against Notre Dame on the road. And of course, they already do have a conference win over Virginia at home as well. And that is going to help them as far as odds to win the conference. So I actually do have Miami as number one favorites to win the conference at this point. Nigel Pack had a really big game against Notre Dame today, as well as Isaiah Wong, who didn't have as good of a game, but he still played pretty good today. But he's been on an insane hot streak. And if they can get that from him, along with Nigel Pack going off, Norchad Omier going off down low, I could definitely see Miami winning the ACC this year. So I have them coming in here at number one. At number two, I do have the Virginia Cavaliers. Virginia, like I said, they lost to Miami. That's why I have Miami at number one, but I still think Virginia, really well-coached team there by Tony Bennett, have a really good, solid veteran starting five, which I think is going to be huge in conference play because veteran players like seniors and juniors, they're going to travel well in road games. They already have that experience. So I think that is huge to have once you get into league play there. So I have Virginia coming in here at number 2. And at number 3, I do have the Duke Blue Devils. There was one more team that I considered for this number 3 spot, but I decided to go with the Duke Blue Devils. They still have some good wins on the season here over teams like Ohio State out of conference. So I'm excited to watch them get into conference play, and they are definitely on an upwards trajectory, at least in my head. I think that they've been playing better, and they have some young guys who I believe that could get going at any point in the season and really help this Duke team go from good to great here in a blink of an eye. So keep your eye out on these young guns here for Duke. It's not just Derek Lively and Derek Whitehead that need to get going. They have a bunch of freshmen on this team that could really help. Kyle Flipowski, he's been doing work. They also have Tyrese Proctor, Mark Mitchell. These freshmen also can get going at any point in time. And of course, they do have the veteran Jeremy Roach. So I do have Duke coming in at number 3. The other team in the ACC that I was considering for the number 3 spot, but I didn't ultimately put them over Duke, and that was Virginia Tech. They've been off to a really good start, but they already have a conference loss on the road to Boston College. So that doesn't really look good whenever you're talking about winning a conference. You got to beat the lower teams in the conference on the road there and pick up some road wins. So Virginia Tech would be my number 4 at this point. But the top 3, Miami, Virginia, then Duke. So let's get into the next portion of the podcast, which, of course, is previewing some of the New Year's Eve games tomorrow. So I'm pretty hyped for these games. Before we get into that portion of the podcast, I just want to say real quick, subscribe if you guys have not already. We are going to be continuing to do the Danny Hoops podcast, an episode every Thursday night at 10 p.m. live here on YouTube. If you can't get here live, though, of course, it will be up as a video afterwards, so you guys can give it a listen. Also, follow me on Twitter at Dannyology1 if you guys want to see my tweets when I post a video, when I go live. I'm always live tweeting during the college basketball games, talking some college hoops, and some other good content there on Twitter. So make sure you guys follow the Twitter. So let's get into previewing some of these New Year's Eve games here tomorrow. And the big one tips off at noon, and it is a Big East battle between two, in my opinion, the 2 best Big East teams, between UConn and Xavier. It is in Xavier in Cincinnati, and I do have I think that's going to be an amazing game because Xavier has an awesome atmosphere there, a really good crowd. UConn undefeated at this point in the season. They're my number 1 team in the country, and you have a really good matchup in between the centers and Jack Nungy and Adama Sanogo. That's going to be a super fun matchup there. Of course, you do have Donovan Clingan coming off of the bench for UConn at center as well, who is a 7'1" freshman. That's going to be a really fun matchup there. I think the guard play is going to be key in this game. If Xavier wants to hand UConn their first loss, they have to play good defense, and I don't know if Xavier can play good defense. Xavier gives up a lot of points to a lot of teams, and they're playing one of the deepest team in the country and that has a really good offense, have a lot of guys who can score the ball. So Xavier is going to have to play good defense. They're going to need their guards, Soli Boom and Colby Jones, who are long, tall, lengthy guards, who should be better at defending, but they need them to be good, not just on the scoring end, because they already are. They need to be good on the defensive end. If they can do that, slow down these UConn bigs, I think Xavier could possibly upset UConn and hand them their first loss. But if I had to make a prediction, I would still go UConn. I just don't think Xavier has the defense to upset the Huskies. But like I said, this is one of the best shots here for UConn to pick up a loss. They're going up against the second best team, in my opinion, at this point in the Big East Conference on the road. Should be interesting. Let me know if you guys think Xavier can pull that one off. We also have another Big East matchup tomorrow, a pretty big one. We have Marquette going on the road to Philly to face the Villanova Wildcats. And Villanova, I know they've been having a down year, but they're actually starting to turn up lately. They've been on a little bit of a win streak until they had to play UConn, which is one of the best teams in the country. They've been turning up ever since they got the freshman Cam Whitmore back. Cam Whitmore, I think, has a ton of potential. He's going to be a top NBA prospect. He's been turning up for him, but recently it's really been Caleb Daniels and Eric Dixon. They're really good forwards. I mean, these are super good Villanova, bred players who wait their turn. They're behind senior players years prior, and they are the key for this team. I know Cam Whitmore coming back kind of got a lot of the recognition because once he came back, that's kind of when Villanova started winning. But I think that took some of the pressure off of Caleb Daniels and Eric Dixon, who have really been getting it going here for Nova. And they are at home, so it's going to be a good environment there in Philly. Here for Marquette coming to town, they do have a really good guard in Cam Jones, who I think is going to need to have a big game to beat Villanova on the road. And I think Marquette needs this road win. They already picked up a conference road loss against Providence in double overtime not too long ago. So last week, actually. So I think Marquette needs this one. I think they need Tyler Kolek to have a big game and Prosper to have a big game. They have a lot of guys who can score. They need a road win. So this would be a big one for Marquette if they can get it. So next three games we're going to be talking about are all Big 12 games, and Big 12 play is opening up tomorrow. I'm super hyped to watch it all go down. And our first game is between my West Virginia Mountaineers going on the road to face Kansas State, who does only have one loss on the season. So a really good game. This is going to be the first game that the Mountaineers are ranked. They're ranked there at number 24. So can they continue to build on the momentum that they've been having here recently, going up against a tough Kansas State team here on the road? I will say, in all these games that I'm going to be talking about, the team that you would probably consider to be better is on the road, which makes these games a lot more interesting. Like UConn on the road at Xavier, Marquette on the road at Villanova. So the favorites are on the road. West Virginia's on the road at Kansas State. It's going to be a really good game. Keontae Johnson's been having a big year. He's been very efficient. West Virginia has a very scrappy defense. They're going to have to force the turnovers like they've been doing all year long. But it's going to be tough because Marquez Noel, there for K-State, is averaging 8 assists per game, one of the best playmakers in the country there. But I think West Virginia's guards, we have really good defensive guards. I think that they are going to be giving Noel a tough time here. And I do think West Virginia picks up a good road win, but I think it's going to be a close one and it's going to be tough. So next up, we got Baylor at Iowa State, also opening up Big 12 play. Like I said, the favorite is on the road in a tough environment there in Ames, Iowa. Baylor, they're going to have to show that their guards can travel, and I think they will. I think Baylor's going to win this game. I don't want to talk too much about this one, but another one I wanted to give a quick mention there because another tough environment there at Iowa State. Also, we have Texas at Oklahoma, going to be Texas's first real test ever since the whole Chris Beard situation went down, and they don't have their head coach. So interim head coach Rodney Terry's first real test here with Texas on the road in Norman, Oklahoma. Can Coach Porter Moser and these Sooners pull off a big upset? I think that this one has a lot of upset potential here in the Big 12. I think Oklahoma at home definitely is going to give Texas a run for their money. I don't know if they're going to be able to close this one out, but I definitely think it will be a close game. You got Grant Sherfield, who at Oklahoma has done some great things, transferred there this year, putting up some good numbers there. You got the Grooves brothers, some good players there that Porter Moser has, and they're going to be playing good defense, going to try to keep it low scoring. That's what they do. I definitely see a lot of upset potential for Oklahoma defeating Texas in the rivalry game. And the last game I wanted to talk about is actually a Pac-12 game. Don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's another situation where the favorite is on the road, and that is between a rivalry game in the Pac-12 between Arizona going on the road to face Arizona State. So it should be a good one. We'll see if Arizona State can bounce back, try to keep it at least close, show us that they're looking good after they had a really bad blowout loss to San Francisco. So we'll see if they can do that against a really, really good Arizona Wildcat team. So that is going to do it for all the New Year's Eve games that I wanted to preview here today. I wanted to give you guys my top Coach of the Year candidates, top 3 Coach of the Year candidates, my top 5 AP Player of the Year candidates, and my top 3 national championship contenders at this point in the season, just like I do at the end of every podcast. And then, of course, after we do that, I will take your guys' questions live in the chat if you guys want to ask me any. So for the Coach of the Year candidates, at number 1, I do have Coach Dan Hurley. I mean, how could you not have him number 1 at this point in the season? He's coached this UConn team up, looking really good, a lot better than what anybody really expected UConn to be this season. In my opinion, they have the number 1 team in the country. He's built a really deep bench through the transfer portal, through recruiting. His 2 really good freshmen, Caravan and Klingon, who are getting a lot of minutes for this Husky team. Dan Hurley coming in here at number 1 for me as far as Coach of the Year candidates. At number 2, I do have Coach Matt Painter at Purdue, the other Power 6 undefeated team. There's only 3 undefeated teams in Division I basketball at this point, and Dan Hurley has one of them in UConn. Matt Painter has one of them in Purdue. Matt Painter, always a super good head coach year in and year out. This might be one of the better teams that he's had. One of the best players that he's had in Zach Edey, 7'4". Like I say, the Yao Ming of college basketball there at Purdue. But the way he's coached the shooting around him and how they played undefeated at this point in the season, I have Matt Painter as my second Coach of the Year candidate. And third, my final one I will be mentioning is Dennis Gates, first-year head coach at Missouri. Hit the transfer portal hard before coaching his first year and really got his guys in there and has not disappointed. They are 11-1 or 12-1 now on the season. Only lost to Kansas, a bad loss to Kansas, I will say, but good wins over Illinois and Kentucky the other night. So Missouri exceeding expectations, especially Dennis Gates, his first year there at head coach, coming in here at number 3 for my Coach of the Year candidates. Now let's get into my AP Player of the Year candidates, and I'm going to do my top 5 here for these ones. At number 1, of course, I just mentioned the Yao Ming of college basketball, Zach Edey. He's been my number 1 in every single podcast that we've done so far. We're on episode 5. I always give you guys my top Player of the Year candidates. Zach Edey's been number 1 in every single one of them. He is sticking in that spot. Excited to see him get into conference play there in the Big Ten. At number 2, I do have Jalen Wilson, the forward for the Kansas Jayhawks. I mean, Kansas has looked really good recently, and Jalen Wilson, what an improvement he's had. He's really stepped into that Ochai Abachi role, became that star stepped into that star number one option role for this Kansas team, putting up almost 20 a game, almost 10 boards a game. He's killing it, man. Like I said, Jalen Wilson is at forward. They rely on him a lot for getting the rebounds because they don't have that, a true big man down low or a really good center. So I do have Jalen Wilson here coming in at number 2. At number 3, I do have Azuolas Tubelis at Arizona. I mean, he is such a mismatch problem, especially when you have Ballo at center. Tubelis at power forward. He's 6'11", can shoot the ball, averaging 19 points a game, above 10 rebounds per game. A really good defender. I have Tubelis coming in at number 3. Again, he's leading his team to a really good start to the year as well. And then at number 4, I do have the Timmy man. I do have the mustache man, Drew Timme at Gonzaga. Feels like he's been there forever, but he's putting up some of the best performances that he's had in his career as of late. He definitely deserves a spot on this list. And Gonzaga, they've lost a few early to Texas on the road, to Baylor by 1 point on a neutral site, to Purdue by over 10 points in the early tournament. But since then, they've gotten some really good wins and have been looking good and are on a win streak right now. And they got a big one. It was technically on a neutral site in Birmingham, Alabama, which is basically a home game for the Crimson Tide. But they beat them and put up 100 points in that game. No overtimes in that game. They just put up 100 points, and Drew Timme had a hell of a performance as a few weeks ago. He's coming in here at number 4. And at number 5, speaking of Alabama, we have the best freshman in the country. I do have Brandon Miller, and Brandon Miller's been taking over games recently. He's taken over. He had 36 against Gonzaga. They fell short in that game, but no fault from him. Against Mississippi State the other night, he was taken over in that one. Really helped them pull away on the road against the Mississippi State team. Looked really good, and he's going to blossom into an amazing scorer throughout the season. I have him coming in here at number 5. Okay, so let's get into my top 3 national championship contenders, and afterwards we will go ahead and take your guys' questions. So if you guys have any questions you guys want to ask me for the podcast, make sure you guys drop them down in the chat, and I will get to them as soon as I finish the national championship contenders top 3. So go ahead and drop those in the chat, and we will get to them right after. So, top 3 national championship contenders for the March Madness tournament at this point in the season. At number 1, I do have the UConn Huskies. If you guys watched my bracket predictions video, which is up on the channel right now, I picked UConn to win the national championship in that one. They just look too deep right now. I've talked about them when I was talking about Dan Hurley. They got a big game tomorrow against Xavier. I think UConn looks like the best team in the country right now, and in my power rankings, I have them number 1. Super deep. They play 10-man deep. Like I say, if they have some guys having an off night, they have other guys that can step up. Crazy deep team. They have 2 really good big men, 2 really good freshman big men too, Caravan and Klingon. They also have, of course, Sanogo down there, Tristan Newton. They have a lot of super good players here on this team. I have UConn coming in here at number 1. At number 2, I do have the Houston Cougars. Again, if you watch the bracket predictions, who did I have UConn beat in the national championship game? The Houston Cougars. They have, in my opinion, maybe the best backcourt in the country with Jamal Sheed and Marcus Sasser, 2 absolute dogs, and both of them are two-way players. Not only can they get you some buckets, especially Marcus Sasser, but they can defend, and Jamal Sheed is a really good playmaker as well. Both of them are super good playmakers as well, which helps a lot. I'm a big fan of Jairus Wallace, as you guys know, if you guys are listeners here to the channel. I think Jairus Wallace is a really good freshman center, one of the better freshman centers in the country, maybe the best. and I think that he's only going to keep improving throughout the year as well. So I have Houston coming in here at number 2, and my number 3. My number 3 was a tough pick here, but I did decide to go with the Arizona Wildcats out of the Pac-12. I think that just them with their two bigs, man, just a tough matchup, and I truly believe that Arizona, with their two bigs, with some good shooting around them, they're going to be tough to stop, and that's a mismatch problem for a lot of teams once we get into the tournament. And I have Arizona as my number 3 national championship contender here at this point in the season. Number 3 was close, though. I had a lot of teams that I was considering. I almost put UCLA over Arizona. I think like I said earlier, I think this is UCLA's best team in the past few years, even though they don't have Johnny Juzang. I think that this UCLA team is for real, and I definitely have my eye out on them. Maybe next week they will jump into this top 3. We will see. But that is going to wrap up the Danny Hoops podcast. Unless you guys have any questions you guys want to drop in the chat here real quick, then we will get out of here. So, if you guys have any questions here from the people that are joining me live, go ahead and drop them in the chat. If not, make sure you guys come back. We will be back to our regular schedule on Thursday nights at 10 p.m. to do the Danny Hoops podcast every single Thursday. So make sure you guys drop by to join us live, and you guys can ask your question at the end of the podcast in the live chat. Also, follow me on Twitter, like I mentioned before, at Daniology1. We do a lot. We're always talking college hoops there on the podcast, live tweeting the games. I let you guys know when I'm posting videos, when I'm going to be live, and all that good stuff. So make sure you guys follow me there on the Twitter. And yeah, so we got a question coming in here from my man Gavin, and he says, will North Carolina be like last year and do great in the Big Dance, or are they just bad this season? I think we got really hyped on North Carolina this season because of their deep run that they had in the March Madness tournament, and really we had reason to do so. They went on a crazy run during March Madness last season and made it to the national championship game and almost won the whole thing from an 8 seed. But they were an 8 seed for a reason last season. How bad they are looking this season, they looked the exact same way during the regular season last year, and that is why they were an 8 seed. And during the tournament, Armando Bacot was always putting up numbers last season, and Armando Bacot was a beast last year. He was one of the best centers in the country, just behind Oscar Tshiebwe and probably Kofi Coburn. Armando Bacot was up there as like the 3rd or 4th best center in the country. And really, Caleb Love, RJ Davis, and of course, Brady Manick was a big part of that team last year. Really started turning up when we got into the tournament. So I just think UNC, they look like they did last season. We gave them too much hype, and now I think that they just had a really good run last year in the tournament. Can they do it again? I think it's possible. Are they going to make the national championship game? I don't think. I think that they could make a run to the Elite Eight, but I think that that's the furthest I see North Carolina getting this season, and I would probably predict at this point that they lose earlier, probably around the Sweet 16 or the second round, because I do think that they will turn up in the tournament again if they get in. But if they get in as an 8 seed, are they going to be able to beat a 1 seed in the second round? I don't really think so. So they're going to have to do some work, but I could see them possibly making a deeper run once again. I just think last year was a little bit more not a Cinderella run, because they are North Carolina, but they were an 8 seed. So I think it's a little bit more of a Cinderella run than we want to think, because how they're looking in the regular season now, this is exactly how they looked last season. So that is what we got for you guys today. We will be back on Thursday next week for episode 6 of the Danny Hoops podcast. So make sure you guys come tune in for that one. As always, we do this every single Thursday, and we have a bunch of college basketball content as well on the channel almost daily here. So if you guys are a college basketball fan, make sure you guys subscribe. And yeah, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. I'm out.